Thanks for tuning into the Hidden Tracks podcast. You can find us wherever you find podcasts or listen to music. When you have an opportunity, please give us a 5-star review, write a little note, tell us how we're doing. We really appreciate it. It helps us keep this thing going. If you want to reach out to us, you can find us at Facebook at Hidden Tracks. Instagram is at HiddenTracks99, and if you'd like to send in submissions or talk to us or give us any feedback about what we're doing, our email is myhiddentracks99@gmail.com. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. What's up, everybody? I'm very lucky to have a man who's had just a great storied career, a great musician, has done a lot in his life. Trials and tribulations have led to a lot of different things in his life. This is Ian from Broken Gold. He's also been a part of Riverboat Gamblers, Band of Horses. Very, very storied career. New album coming out. Could also be out at the time of this release, but I've had the opportunity to hear it, and I'm ecstatic to talk about it today. So first and foremost, welcome to the show, Ian. Really appreciate taking some time out.
Yeah, of course, dude. Thank you for having me. I super appreciate it.
So, new album comes out April 26th. It's called Wild Eyes, and you've already released a single currently, and the album should be out now or soon. How, this is always my first question. How does it feel to know that your hard work's going to see the light of day?
It's pretty crazy, honestly, because I've been working on this. It's been a long time since we did a full length, and for a while there, this band was just something that I could only get to when I could get to it whenever I was home, and I wasn't really home that often, and I always had this kind of nagging feeling that this is kind of like sort of like I felt sort of like something was missing, and I just really wanted to, focus on this band, and so it feels really great that this is finally done because it did take a little while and it did go through many different versions, and these songs have kind of, passed through at least one other band. And I don't know. It's exciting. It's crazy that it's actually the first single is even out, and we have another one rolling out in just 3 days.
Now, do you find it hard when you have this all inside of you and you're working with another band at the time that you have all this, I'll say some greatness inside of you ready to be poured out, but you're doing something else at that time? Is it hard to hold on to that stuff and wait for it to get fleshed out, or is it something that you're looking forward to getting an opportunity to do what you want?
It's more like looking forward, looking forward to getting to do what I want, like a lot of times with working with other bands or, like in things like that, you're sort of, at least my perspective is it grants me the funds to go and do my thing.
Yeah. That's important.
Yeah. Because whenever, I mean, like I did like tour managing and behind the scenes production work for a long time. And I was very lucky to be able to do that. But what that granted me was, in my times off, whenever I was home, I would use that money to just do Broken Gold. And so that really is how we got most of all of our EPs that we've released. How we got those together. Like Turning Blue was completely funded from the money I made working for Foo Fighters. The third EP, same thing. And it granted us, it's called EP3. And we threw that together because we were going on tour with CJ Ramone and needed something new, and so was lucky enough at the moment to be able to afford to put that together and take the band on tour,
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, it's definitely, it's kind of frustrating, and so, but I've always got some sort of outlet, to get these things out. I still do Riverboat Gamblers. And so that was also something, but yeah, I couldn't really ever focus on it that much because I was always out on tour. A lot of things go, if you're not there, you can't do it.
Yeah. And I can only imagine like sitting there watching somebody else do it. Yeah, you're working, you're getting paid, it's going to help for your end goal. But at the same time, just being like, fuck, I just want to be doing this right now.
Yeah. Whenever I was doing the assistant production or the assistant tour manager stuff, hold on, I'm just going to shut my window really quick. It's just,
you're good.
Our air conditioning's out, and so my dog, I don't know if you can hear him downstairs, he's kind of losing his mind because I think the repair guy's here. But
it's good. We're a pet friendly show, man.
That's
great. I just put disclaimers like if you're listening to this on your home speakers, know at 5 minutes in you're going to hear a dog barking. So
yeah. It's weird though. Whenever I was working production and working for bands, I didn't really ever have that sort of, I wish I could be doing this sort of feeling, because the situation I was in, it was on such a large scale that I was just kind of glad to like get the experience and to be around it. And then, whenever I was playing in other bands, same thing. I was just kind of grateful to be there. You know, it was a little, I'd always had these songs, or I mean, I never stopped writing during any of these times. And it sort of was one of those things where like, maybe these could work for this, or, I don't know. It's a really weird thing. It's hard to explain because none of it was like, thought out or planned. I just kind of ended up getting thrown in these situations and was just going with the flow and just seeing kind of what would happen. So it's like, I don't know, there wasn't really moments for me to sit there and be like, man, I wish I could be doing, or like, there wasn't a whole lot of time for reflection.
Yeah.
I was kind of like in the middle of a lot of, it was a bunch of crazy times, and, but, what it did do is give me plenty to later on, whenever things slowed down, I like intentionally kind of slowed things down. It gave me a lot to think about, and, which is really what this record's kind of about.
Now, I listened to the whole thing front to back, and, I what I find pretty important about the record itself is I can hear in like certain songs, like you're actually just like talking to people. That's not to say, for someone who hasn't heard the record yet, that you're not singing. What I'm saying is I can hear you trying to get some stuff out and some stuff off your chest, and I hear you just kind of saying, here's me at my best, here's me at my worst, and it's who I am, accept me for what's going on. I mean, that's what I pulled from it.
Yeah.
I don't know, was there any catharsis to some of the stuff you were putting out and writing about and putting on this record?
There definitely was. I kind of didn't really know what it was. It's weird. It's hard for me to kind of sit down and think about like a subject to write about, like whenever I'm writing my own like lyrics for songs or things like that, it's always sort of one of those things where like, I feel sort of like, what's the word? It's strange because it's almost like a weird guilt thing of being too egotistical to write about things that concern me, And so it was sort of coming from the idea of like, write what you know. And so finally I was just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to write about this specific incident or this specific kind of way that I felt. So, I mean, a lot of the songs have to deal with, me. They don't outright say it, but it's about, like addiction and sobriety and and just kind of what all of those years touring, kind of the byproduct of that subconsciously was just, I had no idea that I was basically coping with like severe anxiety, all the time. And so I kind of that gave me kind of a bit of all right, I've got a lot to work out, and recently started going to therapy as well. And so it is a therapeutic, cathartic record in a way, because it's really just about, the aftermath of being like a professional musician. I mean, big air quotes around professional, but, but, like,
Hey,
it's
listen,
not.
You can't take away from, you've done some very important things. You've been in some very important bands. So yeah, don't want you to sit here and sell yourself short with air quotes. You are a professional musician. You've done more than most people could ever dream of in their life. So, you're allowed to enjoy that and take some ownership of it. And don't ever sell yourself short, because you're still fucking rocking and putting out good music. So, I commend you for that. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, but that's the cool thing is I kind of, like I learned a lot. I've learned a lot by doing and, and then, but also made those mistakes, it's the only way that you can learn. And so just seeing kind of how things work and just learned a lot of songwriting things over the years too, but yeah, I don't know. It's cool that this thing's finally coming out though, because, we tried to avoid being in the studio, like, and sheerly out of funds too. Like we would go in there for just like a few days. And then, the guys in my band now are so badass that we knocked out like basics and just like for 6 songs in like a day. And then would come back and just do, like a month later, come back and do the same thing. There was a couple songs too that were written, right before they were recorded. And that was pretty exciting because we would go in and record like a batch of 6 of them. And then I was kind of thinking like, all right, we got these other 6, but I just wrote this one that I think is going to be awesome. Let's throw that on there too. And just having the ability to be able to go and do that, especially with these guys, with Bobby Daniel and Sam Rich, and Ben Lance, it was a really fun experience making the record, even though it's sometimes singing the words was a little, kind of like, it's weird to do that, when there's somebody else sitting there, like, oh man, I kind of have to go into like I don't know, a different headspace that sort of like, not literally doing this, but like that sort of like when like just imagine everybody's in their underwear sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to take your shirt off and show everyone your scars, right? Like that's the way you look at it. Like it's hard to go jump in that pool when as soon as you take your shirt off, everyone's going to look at all the scars all over your body from all the trauma people had in their life. That's the way I always look at things. It's like, all right, am I going to be okay to do this and how do I get through it? I mean, I deal with anxiety myself. This is my therapy. This show is my therapy. Getting to talk about music, making me happy for a little bit, during my day. And I know exactly what you mean. It's really hard because you're opening Pandora's box while you're looking at yourself in the mirror and watching everything flow out.
Oh, completely. And, but I've always sort of used Broken Gold as this sort of cathartic thing. Whenever I started the band with the original guys with Pat and Rich, the main thing, it wasn't completely intentional, but when we started writing songs, it's the same thing, like write what you know. And at the time, I was dealing with just the aftermath of a really crazy bike accident that I was in. And so part of my physical therapy was they wanted me to keep a recovery journal of just like day to day everything, like what hurt, what didn't, how many pills I was taking a day and all that stuff. And so I was just kind of turning those sort of same things into songs. And that gave me another record, worth of stuff to sing about. And so this is sort of like definitely Broken Gold's a very personal thing. And it is like my therapy band.
Well, when you were done doing that and performing and showing everyone your scars, did you feel any, talking about it being cathartic, did you feel any weight lifted off your shoulders by any means with like anxiety and stuff like that? Was it like a deep breath you were able to take when it was over? You're like, okay.
Yeah, because I actually kind of figured out what this whole thing was about. When people ask you like what songs are about, sometimes it's hard because, the whole, how much do I share, like how ambiguous do I want this to be? And, or how, relatable should I make this?
I don't want to know I'm the type of person, I don't want to know what the songs are about, because as soon as I hear them, I take my own meaning to it. It's now owned by me. Once you put it out in the world for me to listen to, guess what? It's no longer your fucking song. So I don't care what you wrote it about. Now it's mine, and sometimes I've heard, like Springsteen talk about a song that he's written. I'm like, well, now I'm like, now I don't like that song anymore because now I'm thinking about his meaning for writing it, which, hey, that's great. He's the boss. He's allowed to do that. But at the same time, I had something else that it meant to me, and it almost kind of diminishes what I felt about the song sometimes. That's just me, though.
No, completely, completely. But to answer that, I really did, because it sort of shed a light in other aspects of my life of just, what has really been kind of fucking me up, and so I was like, God, I wrote a whole record about this shit. Once it was all done and I could see it all, when the record was finished, I still was a little sort of like, okay, there's songs about touring, there's songs about bands, there's songs about relationships and all that stuff. But I was working on the artwork with my buddy Joby, and he plays in that super rad band, The Bronx. And I was typing out all the lyrics for him. And once I hadn't done that yet, like I had them all spread across like notebooks and notes on my phone and stuff, but I hadn't seen them all right in front of me in one piece. And once I threw all that together, I was like, wow, this couldn't be more crystal clear for me, like what I was kind of getting out over the last year when we were recording, and so, it did feel relieving, and it is kind of like, you get that sort of nervous thing that, you're about to release, basically your, that thing that is
your diary.
Yeah. Like your diary, or like, for me, it's you're releasing your diary, and this thing that only you and your closest friends have heard, or worked on, which is the guys in the band, and you're sharing it with everybody now. But I am very happy about what it came out as. I feel like the way that it sounds is sort of like, for the time being, is the most distilled version of everything that we love, with influences and things we like to hear in songs, and so I'm really excited to share it and for everyone to hear it, because it almost feels like this, like, finally, I get to like release this stuff that I've been working on and listening to on my own for some of it's like years,
Wow.
Some of these like songs that I've been sitting on that I just, once you finish writing something or you demo something, I'm like, that sounded, I can't, like, that's going to be so rad to play live. And next thing you know, it's been 4 years and that thing is still just a file on your computer,
Yeah, it's tough when it just sits there, right? And you're staring at it, and you're like, when do I get to share this? When do I get to let everyone, capture what I see with my own eyes and own ears,
Yeah, and that's sort of been a thing that has been, whenever especially in the last 2 years, I kind of made a sort of like a personal pact with myself that, like, I'm not waiting around anymore, or like, if there's something, or saving this for some reason, because maybe, somebody else will want this and it will get farther than I could make it myself or something like that. Like, I'm finally, like, I decided basically to like invest in myself and do and do all this thing. Cause, I've put my life on hold for so long, for so many other people, which, like I said, I'm very grateful for all of the opportunities that I've had in my life. But, I've never really fully invested in myself. And this record is, the first sort of like therapeutic way of doing that,
Without a doubt. I mean, it sounds too like you and I are running parallel lines to each other. I'm about in my life to take a big jump because I've never really bet on myself. I've never, I've always done things for other people, and I've never taken something just for myself to do something. It's always been like, all right, we got to do this for them. We got to, and it's hard. Like, I try to explain to people, it's very easy if you're a good person, good human being. It's very easy to help and do other things for other people, but it's 100 times harder to do them for yourself.
Oh yeah, you feel fucking lame or like, selfish or, I don't know. It's a weird thing. But I'm still like that. I still like, I teach guitar lessons. I produce records for other people. I like helping other people do what they want to do just because, I've had the experience before, and I feel like, at least I can point them in the direction to not make the mistakes that I've made in my whole career or whatever. So I do enjoy still like being of service to others. But at the same time, I'm really being aware of what the things that I need and what that itch and anxiety is coming from, and really it's just not being fair with myself of, hey, I got to sit down and write some shit, and I'm going to try and do this band, but,
let's try to pick something hard now for you. I mean, with the album, getting ready to see the light of day, you look at it this way: you only have one opportunity to make an impression on someone with what Broken Gold is, and you could only play him one song to make that impression. What song off the new record would you play for him?
Oh man, I would say, it's a toss up between.
I have a toss up between two that I wrote down. So.
This song "Fault."
That's my number one that I've written down. I can take a screenshot and show you.
Oh, that's incredible. Okay, so like I would say Fault, or there's a song called Little One that I think is also, that I don't know. I really like that one. But I this in particular, this record, I really wanted there to be focus on every single one of the songs. It's just the same thing as the like all killer, no filler.
Yeah.
And there's a couple that kind of fly by real quick, but that was intentional. But I'm curious to hear what yours was. So my answer is Fault.
Yeah. So I have Fault, and then my second one is Clouds.
Clouds.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know what it is. Like, okay, if the record's going to stay the same the way that you guys sent it to me, Fault's just, I mean, it literally starts the album off. Is that the way it's going to stay?
Yeah, that's the first.
So it starts the album off, and I've always tried to explain to younger artists and stuff, you have one opportunity to catch someone. So if you're putting out a full-length album, you have to capture them with that first song. And that's exactly what Fault did for me. And it made me go back and listen to it again, because that's when it's impactful. And then I'm going through and I found myself going back to Clouds again. And I was like, I couldn't put my finger on it. And I was like, I don't know what it is, but this song is just, it was almost like it was written for me. So that's why like Fault and Clouds those are my two. Little One is great, but for me, it's either Fault or Clouds.
That's really interesting, and that's cool. I feel like Clouds is sort of, if there is a sound for this band that we have sort of, it wasn't in, when this band started, there was no intentional, like, we're going to do this. The main touch points that we were like Bruce Springsteen and all of the Manchester bands that we like. It was, the band has gone through like several different sort of influences, I guess. And then at one point I was like, fuck it, I just want to open it up to, I want this to be a band where I could literally do anything, there's going to be drum machines or some shit, not going like full on dance or anything like that. But, like
I felt a lot of different influences in each song. And that's, when I look back at some things and I'm listening to it, when I can hear different influences, like from all over the spectrum, from newer bands to older bands. Like I'm listening to one song, I'm like, this reminds me a little bit. I don't know if you'll probably know the band. There was a Midwestern band in the 80s called Spooner. I was like, I get a little bit of Spooner in here. And then the next one, I'm like, I got a little bit of Robert Pollard, Got It by Voices. I got and it's like, I'm getting all these different influences. And that's what I also love with the expression that music brings, is because you can kind of tell that someone knows what they're doing when you can correlate it to some other time in music and some other space continuum that will lead you back to that moment.
For sure. It's definitely like, that's all of those things that those things that you mentioned is, I mean, that's my favorite stuff. And, I always wanted with this to do a complete, like a distillation of all of the things that I really like about songs and songwriters. And a lot of them aren't very popular, and, especially like in this town. But we're not from the Midwest, and this band definitely has a very Midwestern quality to it, and a very college radio of a certain era kind of thing. And but yeah, I'd say Clouds is sort of the most, whenever that one, it's funny because I've been, I always go back and listen to stuff to see how it holds up, even a month after the fact. Like I listen to a lot of music and I'm around a lot of music every single day just because I work at a music school.
Yeah.
And so I'll throw something on just to see if I still think it's good. And whenever Clouds pops up, that's one where I'm like, that's kind of quintessentially this band. the little snaky guitar lines and, the heart on the sleeve kind of lyrics and stuff. And, that song is very much autobiographical.
I like that I could pull it out. That it, that's the one that gets me, along with Fall. It is really funny that I always write down one or two songs before I ask that question, and I'm like, these are the songs I would pick. I always like to see if it matches with the artist. A lot of times it does, a lot of times it doesn't. But when it does, it's like, yes, okay. So I'm hearing what they're putting out.
That's awesome, man. Fault's actually going to be the third single that we release off this.
Nice.
And we opened up with Spiraling just because it's sort of Spiraling was one of the first songs that was written for this record, and that actually could kind of pass through the hands of Band of Horses as well. And but it sort of had a different vibe than anything that we had done previously, but still kind of sounded it sounded like the band, but it we wanted to open up with something. This whole new record is I'm treating it sort of like a reboot of the band, because the band is, the members are different except for my really good friend Ben Lance, and we're taking it in we're committed to it differently than it ever has been, Nice. And so we wanted to open up with a little bit more of a statement. I feel like coming out with a straight ahead big old banger rocker was maybe a little expected, but just from my past, with being in Riverboat Gamblers and stuff, it's big loud ass punk rock band.
Yeah.
So just something a little, ear catching, I was hoping. And people have been really digging it. It's definitely, I feel like I even sing a little different than usual on that one, but it's cool. Yeah. I'm really super stoked about this thing.
Me too. I'm super stoked for other, sometimes, especially when I get things sent to me well prior to a release, like I always sit here and I'm like, man, I hate the fact that I get to enjoy this for 2 or 3 months before anyone else gets to hear this. And I feel terrible because I get to enjoy something. And I'm like, man, I just want this to get out. I need other people to hear this. I want to be able to share it with people. You know what I mean? And, I'll never give anybody anything until the day it comes out. But as soon as it does, it's like, yo, go listen to this today. It came out today. Go listen to it right now.
I really appreciate that. That's awesome, man. I feel the same way. If it left to me, I would just, throw all this stuff up on, on Bandcamp and just be like, check out the thing I made. But I'm trying to do things differently, and luckily I have some people working with me to help generate, at least some sort of excitement building up to it. And it also just gives us time to do cool stuff that we haven't really done before with this band. Like, it's like music videos and just coming up with like a proper plan. The music landscape is so incredibly different even from last year, and just like what works to get things in front of people, it's
so hard to navigate.
It's so frustrating. And I've been doing this since I was 17 years old, and I get kids asking me all the time like what they should do, and my whole thing is just like, practice, write good songs, play shows.
Yeah. It's a simple formula. It's the ones that want to try to do what they see as successful today, where it's like a TikTok or something. And it's like to make a career into, if you're really in it for the music, it's exactly right what you said. You have to practice. You have to write good songs, because good songs will stand the test of time. So who knows, you may not be found today, but you may be found 5 years from now. And it's only the matter that you're found that's important, and playing shows and getting your name out there. Just putting out a TikTok or a reel, yeah, that may get you a million views, but you're never heard of again.
Yeah. And what's the old saying? The cream rises. What is it? Whatever.
Cream rises to the top.
Yeah, exactly. Let the proof be in the pudding there,
Yeah.
Because sure, there are plenty of bands or artists that you see out there that are, maybe they've gone viral on something, but then you go and check it out and you're just kind of like, well, okay, I get it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing for me too, is like, I have this, this theory, and anyone that's ever played music or written music, I always say you can always write one good song that people are going to like. The problem is the second one, the third one. You can stumble across writing a good song. It happens to anyone who's ever made music. There's a way that, again, if you've practiced, if you're writing, you can write one good song. The problem is getting that second good song and the third, and continue to write good songs. That's the hard part, because some people they hit it on that one song. It was called one-hit wonders back in the day, but there are a lot of one-hit wonders who have great catalogs of music that no one ever heard of again, because they were a different band than that one great song that they wrote. But it's trying to flush out that second one is the hardest thing in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like, at least an issue for me with songwriting is just knowing when something is done, or just,
putting too much paint on the canvas ruins a picture, right? Yeah, that's exactly the hard part. Yeah.
And just saying, like, you know what, this thing is done. And I'm like that in the studio too, because if I go back and listen to recordings that I used to do, it was like everything in the kitchen sink, lots of guitar things are clashing with one another. And with this particular record, I really wanted to make sure that we were serving the song with, like, this doesn't need, to have 5 different guitar parts all happening at the same time. And, I've made those mistakes. I've done that. The first Broken Gold record is insane. We spent way too much time in the studio, and, I was wasted the whole time making that record. And, and it's, to me, when I listen to it, it immediately takes me back, and I think about it, and it's almost kind of hard to listen to.
Well, it's a time machine. That's the only thing in the world that does it. Music, it's a time machine. It can take you exactly back to that spot, and you can smell the smells and hear the sounds and see the sights, and it's just like, fuck.
Yeah, I just remember being hot all the time. We recorded at a place that was called Sweatbox.
Well, but you should have known.
Yeah, exactly. But just being hot all the time, and it was a fun time. That was back when, my life kind of felt like summer all the time. And back when rent here was extremely cheap. I lived in a place that cost $225 a month. And I just rode my bike around every day. And
for the people listening who don't know, Ian lives in Austin, so quite a change since then.
Oh my gosh, this place is so different than, back when Gamblers moved here. We moved down here because it was cheap and it was easy to be in a band and live here. And that is completely changed. And I hate to be one of those, like, back in my day, it was, cost 50 cents to, but
we all do it. We all do
it. But, I do like the town now, though. I still don't think I would live anywhere else, honestly, except maybe there was a while there. It's funny you said from New Jersey. There was a while there where I was like, man, I might move up there, all my friends live there. It's close to everything, I could go, and you can do an East Coast tour and drive 2 hours tops, 3 hours to all of these different cities.
Yeah.
And I just love it out there. Early on with this band, we would fly out and play in Asbury all the time. And we've recorded out there. Our drummer, Rich Calley, he was from there. And still have a special place in my heart for that. But I know it's different. Same thing like Austin. But it's like the time machine of that place, even 15 years ago or something like that is still very special to me.
Now, I have a question for you. When did music kind of first take a hold of you? You know, as a child, was there music always playing? I always try to preface this by saying, you know, I remember when I was 6 years old and I heard the Beach Boys for the first time. My life forever changed. You know, there was always music on when I was growing up, but like that was the moment that my life kind of changed about music. Do you remember being a kid and having a moment like that?
Yeah, so back when I'm from San Jose, California, and I grew up there until I was in freshman year of high school. And so during that time, though, everybody on my mom's side is Navajo Indian. And so my grandmother, she was like born on the reservation from Arizona in this tiny little place called Fort Courage. And every summer, we would take these Greyhound trips from San Jose to Fort Courage, and it took days. And I always enjoyed those trips. I'd never flown really before, except when I was a little kid. So traveling was mainly on Greyhounds. And so on those trips, I would always bring my Walkman and just cassette tape Walkman when I was just a little kid. And so I remember just buying tapes at truck stops. And so I bought this one, and it was just a comp of like old 50s songs like Tallahassee Lassie and all that stuff. And I just played that thing so much that I knew like every single little piece of it. And so later on, you know, those trips would be like my time where I'd really get like listen to music. And whenever I got older and my parents split, my mom moved to Texas for a job. And so at the time I was getting into music, and it was actually pretty cool growing up sort of in the Bay Area around that time, because you could still hear Social Distortion and Rancid and all that stuff on the radio all the time. And so I remember liking it. I didn't know what it was though. Yeah. I didn't know that it was like, you know, punk or things like that. And so whenever I moved to Dallas, to me, that was like a huge shift, and it was depressing. You know, I was like, all of my friends, I have nothing to do. And so what ended up happening was I met like a couple of kids, and they were like super into punk, like very, very, you know, the whole Studs, Spikes, all that stuff. And so I started gravitating towards them because it was the closest thing to friends that I had back home. And my mom, once like kind of going through more of her cassette tape collection, she actually had a bunch of punk records. Like she had X's Under the Big Black Sun. She had she bought me a Dead Kennedys CD. So as I grew older, my mom,
that's a dope mom. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my mom sort of kind of told me, she was like, oh, this is a band that me and your dad used to go to see. I had no clue, you know. I remember my dad had a Clash record when I was younger, but I didn't know that they grew up going to punk shows and doing things like that. So my mom was kind of introducing me also when she saw that I was like kind of interested in this stuff. She bought me a Dead Kennedys record, that Plastic Surgery Disasters album. And once I heard that, because when I listened to X at the time, I kind of didn't really know what to make of it, because it was that Under the Big Black Sun record. It was a little all over the place. There were some songs that were fast, but then they had songs like Please Come Back to Me, which was kind of like a 50s kind of love song. But when I heard Plastic Surgery Disasters, that kind of really blew my mind open. And I immediately just wanted to play guitar. And I ended up borrowing a Strat from one of those friends of mine and just sat there for an entire summer trying to learn how to play guitar. And the song that I got obsessed with, because eventually I figured out there was a record store right up the street from where I lived. And I walked up there and I bought the first Clash album sight unseen. You know, like I knew that they had Rock the Casbah and all that stuff, but I bought their very first record just because of the picture on the front. and I didn't know what it sounded like. This is pre-internet and YouTube and all that stuff. I just looked at it and I was like, this looks cool. And so I took it home, and it was the US version that started off with the song Clash City Rockers. And I remember that one particular song I was obsessed with, and I played it constantly on repeat. And then when I started playing guitar, that was the song that I wanted to learn. And so whenever I was teaching myself how to get through the power chords of this, once I figured it out, I was like, oh shit, I'm going to start writing songs. And I just started writing songs without really knowing what I was doing, and wanted to start a band, and the rest is history. And
did you start a band right after that? And what was the name of that very first band?
That very first band was called Dead Cities.
Not bad. Oh, wow. We've had some really shit ones. That's not bad.
Well, so it was Dead Cities, and I had gotten really into like GBH and the Exploited and the Verukers and Broken Bones and stuff like that at this point, because Dallas, I couldn't have, it was the silver lining of moving to Texas was Dallas had an incredible punk scene at the time. And in my journeys to record stores, because I figured I spent a lot of time hanging out with some friends, but I also spent a lot of time alone. And I would, my mom was working all the time, and my grandmother was living with us so she could take care of my sister. So I would take I figured out how to ride the bus in Dallas. And I don't know if you know Dallas, but it's huge. And so I would take the bus to go and find these record stores. And there was a famous one called Bill's Records and Tapes. And I figured out how to take the bus there, and it took all day. But every single time when I was heading to Bill's, I would always run into like other older, like in their 20s, punk rocker people. And they'd see me with like my homemade Clash shirt or like my homemade Exploited shirt, and they kind of got a kick out of it. And one day I was taking the bus to Bill's, and there was a guy sitting in the bus, and he was like, "Have you ever heard the UK Subs?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, "Well, get off at this next stop." And it turned out that he worked there at the record store. And so he took me in there, and he gave it to me like a UK Subs CD of Another Kind of Blues, the first record. And from that was sort of like, I took that as like, oh, I can keep coming back here now, and that's how I found out about everything that was going on. Cause we'd have some pretty DIY garage shows out there at this place called Moon Tunes, which I remember I went there once and I was so fucking scared because it was like, it was not it was an old Volkswagen repair shop that they would have these shows there. So all of these bands like Osrot and A Global Threat, Clip 45, the Casualties, a long time ago, like the Casualties would play there. So this is probably like in 99, 2000 or so. And so that really opened up my world. And from going there, I started meeting people that drove all the way over there from a little town called Denton. And, that was a whole on the opposite side of the Metroplex and DFW. And that's where everything actually changed for me going to Denton. So, exploring around there, as scary as it was, I ended up making some friends that I still have today, and I was, 15 and I had my little band. And so we were just constantly trying to, get on these shows, and we ended up Dead Cities morphed into another band called Gagged and Hung. And, we got a couple of shows, once we started going up to Denton, that was a whole different scene. It was a college town. People used to say it was like a mini Austin. And, that's where I met everybody that I still know today. And there was a whole different music scene that was just in the little universe of Denton, Texas, because Denton was a music college. And that's where there was a band called the Riverboat Gamblers that was playing around, and they were like a house party band. And the Marked Men and, all of these bands. And they would have up there, I felt like that's where sort of more of the rock and roll 77 kind of vibe stuff was happening. and kind of would play at. And that's what I gravitated towards. And so I started going up to Denton more often, and I started Gagged and Hung morphed into a band called The Kicks. And that was pretty fun during that time. We got a few 7 inches put out in an EP, and that's when we started playing with bands like the Marked Men and opening up for the Riverboat Gamblers and all of their offshoots. There was a band called the Chop Sockies, and it was a really fun time to be as young as I was. I was like 16, 15.
And just doing it all on your own, just figuring it out as you went along.
Yeah, my mom was super stoked about it. Like she was glad that there was something that I was getting really into. And I've always, as soon as I started playing guitar and figuring out how to like be in a band or run a band in a way like it was the only thing that I cared about, and still to this day it's kind of like the only thing that I feel like I know that I'm really at least halfway decent at doing, or at least it's the only thing I have experience in. And so by the time like the Kicks, we had put out some 7 inches, and we made a little demo in our garage and recorded it on a 1 track at a time 4-track, and had to figure out how to get the cassette tape onto an MP3 to burn to a CDR. And then we just sent those out through Maximum Rock and Roll. And we ended up getting a little 7-inch put out on this label called Palato Records. And their big thing was that they were about to put out a band called the Exploding Hearts. And they had their first song was called Modern Kicks, which I remember because that was the name of our band, was The Kicks, and they came out at the same time. And so some of the bands that I really liked at the time were on that label too. This band, The Riffs, and we drove down to South by Southwest and played one year. And we were the youngest kids on all these shows because our bass player was like 18. Our drummer was like in his 30s, but he was a great drummer. And I was like 15, 16 years old. And we were sort of a novelty in that aspect, that there was, like these super young kids playing this rock and roll kind of 70s punk rock stuff. And, all I did was play guitar. So I was like pretty okay at guitar, and it sort of lined up perfectly for when Riverboat Gamblers needed a guitar player and to go on their first big US tour. And they ended up asking me to do that. And I did that and still do that to this day. It's crazy.
Crazy to think, where you came from of listening to a tape on a Greyhound bus that you bought at a truck stop to touring the US with a band, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it all kind of happened really quickly. I just remember, going up to Denton was such a huge thing because that's where it was such a really special time. That's when, everybody was hanging out with each other, and, a lot of people were in college, and, you would just go to somebody's house and everybody would be over there and they'd just be listening to records, meeting Jeff Burke up there from the Marked Men was a huge thing for me because he recorded everything himself, and he had a band called Potential Johns, and he would play. And that was like, at the time it was my favorite music, and still is some of my favorite music. From going on those little record store adventures, there was a store that opened up across the street from my school called CD Addict. And I remember I bought a Buzzcocks CD of Singles Going Steady. And behind the counter, there was this guy named Mark Burke. And he was like, hey, if you like this, you might really like my brother's band. And he was like, do you have a record player? I was like, oh, yeah. And so he gave me the first Marked Men record. And I went home and it was just so good. It was everything I liked about fast, buzzy, poppy punk rock stuff. And I came back and I was like, I love that. And he was like, well, they're actually playing a show. And I couldn't believe that I could actually go and see this band that I was listening to, because when I was a kid, I was listening to all these old bands and they were all either broken up or dead, or maybe you'd see, the Vibrators come through or something, and there wasn't many of those old bands doing this sort of like reunion thing. And so I was always looking for newer bands that were doing this kind of style that I liked. And those bands never really came through Dallas a whole lot. And so once like the Marked Men found out they were actually playing in Denton, I went up there, and that's kind of where I met everybody. And we were the youngest kids there by far. And I had like, bleached white hair. And I just remember it was same thing, like going there, like, what are you guys doing here? Like everybody else, it was like, adults, because it was a real small, close knit scene up there. And so the fact that we were these little teenage aliens up there, they were like, who are these fucking kids? And so we started talking to them, and that kind of was how I met everybody in Riverboat Gamblers. And I just remember like going up there and sneaking out of the house and going up to Denton and like throwing rocks at Foddy, the Gamblers guitar player, throwing rocks at his window to be like, hey, what are you guys doing? Because we go up there and play like Sega, and because they would just be hanging out and listening to records and stuff. And I just remember like Foddy would answer the door like, you don't have to do that. I live a lot like with roommates. we're adults, but we were cool, like we weren't, that's the same thing. It's like we're trying to be as cool to not like get kicked out of hanging out with all these other older, cooler people, and yeah, it's I don't know, it's such a trip. But right when I graduated high school, Gamblers needed a guitar player, and I had nothing ahead of me. What I thought I was going to do was the Kicks were going to go on tour or something like that. But then Foddy gave me a call and asked if I would be into filling in for one tour. And that after the second show, they just asked if I would be in the band. And then we all moved to Austin, which was kind of crazy.
Wow. Yeah. So everything did happen pretty fast for you then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. Do you have a band in your life that's just like a constant for you, a band that never lets you down? Like when you don't know what you want to listen to, you just always go to them because they're not going to let you down with what you're putting on to listen to?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, The Clash is still my favorite band. I think, that's a template for a lot of things for me. Not for like, not even like, even if it's not something to where I'm like, oh, this sounds like The Clash, but just the way that some of the songs were built up, like the guitars were never really ever doing the same thing. There's two guitars, but they were always doing different stuff. I always think about that a lot. Guided by Voices is one of those bands. The Replacements, obviously, they're very a near and dear thing to me, and I really love what Tommy Stinson's been putting out lately. But I always go back to like my big three. It's kind of like either The Clash, The Cure, or The Replacements, and those are the things whenever I'm feeling kind of I don't know, a down. I know I can put those on and immediately be like, oh yeah, this is the security blanket.
That's the Cure for me. Like anytime, like it's like I just need something, to get me over. And a lot of times it's like the obscure stuff. Like I always, the Cure, saw them last year, 3.5 hours they played, and like they saved all their hits for the 2 encores they did, which the 2 encores was 16 songs, but the first 23 they played were some B-side stuff, and I was like, this is what I love.
Dude, I saw that same tour, and every single time I've seen them the first time I saw them was on the Blood Flowers tour, and they are such a great band for like any mood that you're in. And it's insane that they've had such a great career. I celebrate it all.
Yeah.
I go through. I love all those B-sides. Like whenever I remember back in the days of like LimeWire and all of that stuff, like finding specifically searching for all of those B-sides, like that song "A Few Hours After This" or "The Exploding Boy," or there's a bunch of those. Some of those B-sides are like my favorite records. I actually was just talking about. I don't know if you've ever checked out The Glove. Did you ever listen to that?
I don't think so, but I'm writing it down. I probably have heard it.
The Glove. It was a project that Robert Smith did with Steve Severin from Susie and the Banshees.
Yes, I have heard it.
And but so I heard that record and I was like, oh, this is cool. I forget who they had singing. It wasn't Susie, but she sounded very Susie-esque. But there was a version of the record that got released in the deluxe reissue thing, and it was all of his demos of him singing to like drum machine and 4-track kind of stuff. And it's so good. And so whenever I heard that, I was like, it'd be rad if there was a band that just sounded like these demos, and I just did a little Bandcamp Friday thing for Broken Gold, and I'd actually had some versions of the songs that I had tried to kind of make sound like that I released. And yeah, I mean, The Cure is one of those. I mean, they're a very special band to me as well. I think it kind of creeps in there too on this last record with a lot of, especially the bass kind of stuff.
Nice. Now, the world's going to end in 5 minutes. And you have to listen to one song. What song are you listening to?
Oh my God.
Yeah, fucking you up right now.
Wow. Kiss Me Deadly by Generation X.
Nice. All right. Now, talking as much about punk rock as we have, is there something that you listen to that people be really surprised? The guy that just waxed poetically about punk rock for an hour would be really surprised to hear you get tons of enjoyment out of listening to?
Well, let's see. I feel like Bruce Springsteen isn't that big of a surprise or would be that crazy. But
it's not that crazy. Especially, I'm from Jersey, so the day you're born, you're handed a Bruce album.
Yeah, I really love him, but I think that I also listen to I really like Sade.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I like that, and I'm a big. I know that he is said some stupid shit in the press, but I do like the Smiths and Morrissey quite a bit. And trying to think of anything else that's kind of the weird thing that I always listen to. It's going to take me a second. Sorry.
Yeah, I think you hit where I needed to be, and that was Sade.
Yeah, I like Sade a lot. I like a lot of stuff like that. That goes back to like my mom's kind of eclectic record or music stuff. She listened to Madonna a lot, like early Madonna. So I like that stuff a lot too, like Borderline and Lucky Star and that's definitely the Time Machine feeling. Remember whenever
it's hard not to enjoy the pop sensation that Madonna was at that time,
Yeah. Really like Stevie Wonder. And, I never really got into classic rock stuff at all, ever. I kind of still have a hard time getting super into that. I love Van Halen. That is like the family band.
Is it Van Halen or Van Hagar? Where do you stand?
Oh, Diamond Dave, man. I appreciate Van Hagar, though. I appreciate it because I love that song Dreams a lot. I've gone days where I listen to that song on repeat.
Yeah, see, I'm a Hagar guy. Like, I know I fell in love with Van Halen because of Diamond Dave. I remember the day I got 1984. Like, I remember that. And I remember, at the roller skating rink, skating around to Jump. but when it came to me understanding music more and enjoying it more, that's when I just was like, yeah, no, I guess I fall on the Van Hagar side.
Yeah, like I said, they were the family band, man. Whenever I was growing up in California, I used to do flooring with my uncle Virgil, and so we'd go and like rip up carpet, lay carpet, all that stuff, and every single time we were listening. I mean, he liked it all. He even got into the dude from Extreme period, and
Gary Cherone.
Gary Cherone. He even got into that. So, I mean, we would listen to all of it constantly. It was just the soundtrack of that time, like, going and stretching carpet and flooring and all that stuff. And so it sort of was instilled. There was a while there too. And this is a thing that happened for me personally where, my mom had a tape player in the car and those tapes would just be like the car music,
Yeah.
So, and it would never change. She just left Van Halen 2 in there. So anytime we got in the car, Van Halen 2 was playing. And years later, I ended up with a Forerunner where the only thing that worked was the tape player. And so I would just like, all right, Prince Dirty Mind is my car music for the next year. And it was literally just because I was too lazy to change the tape, but I just always liked getting in the car and that coming on, So that's another one. Prince. I love Prince. And especially that record.
That's awesome.
I've even tried to write some Gambler songs that sound like a couple of the songs on that record.
Good luck, man.
Yeah.
Now, is there a moment through your storied career to this point, for good or bad, just occupies space in your brain at all times that, you're just never going to forget? Like, it's just a moment in time, like, that just has something to do with music that you'll never forget about.
I mean, there's a few, but a big one that I'll never forget just because it was such an insane, stressful day was when I was working for Foo Fighters, the day that Dave fell off stage and broke his leg, because it was fucking scary. And I remember that day crystal clear. And it was, we were in Gothenburg, Sweden, and I had been working for them for maybe a year and a half or a year at this time. And I remember my job was, I was the assistant tour manager. So I was the guy that would be like 5 minutes, 2 minutes. All right, guys, let's walk. And so we walked to the stage, and I remember that was the first day that all of their families had gotten there. So it was in the middle of this European tour, and we went from being, like a sort of a small touring party, like you have A party and B party. A party is the band and the immediate like security guards and me and two other people. And then B party is crew and everybody else, which there was like 100. It was a huge production. And so their family showed up that day. So A party turned into like 30 people all at once. And I remember it just being kind of stressful all around. But I remember walking them out, and it was an outdoor show, and everything was going as it always does. And he's playing that song Monkey Wrench, and he runs to one side of the stage to ramp up the crowd. And then he like focuses on the center, and then he ran towards where I was standing, which was stage right. And kind of was just like looking out at the venue. It's a really cool venue. It's like this open sort of stadium. It's called the Ulevy Stadium. And he ran out, and all of a sudden he was gone, and the band was still playing. And I was kind of looking around like, where the hell did he go? Maybe he jumped down to a speaker down there and was rocking out or something in front of that side of the crowd. But then you hear all of this like clang, 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 like guitar, completely on, getting smashed around. And so I remember I like looked out over, and we see him on the mic down there. He like asked for a microphone, and I remember him saying that he was pretty sure he broke his leg, and that was really scary because I didn't know what it was going to, immediate you go into sort of like, I ran the fastest I've ever ran down the hall to go and get my buddy that I worked with, this guy Gus, because I was in charge of walking the band out so that he could go back and kind of work on things for the next day. And I ran down the hall to grab him, and I'd never seen this guy run as fast. And so we both ran back to the stage and got the security people to help. And there was paramedics on site. We pulled him over to the side, and he was like, they were like, what can I do? And they were like, well, you need to go to the hospital. And he was like, do you hear all those people out there? I can't fucking stop this show. And so he was like, can I go up there and at least do a few more? And they were like, well, your leg needs to get set. Like, you broke it. And so he like just looked at the paramedic and was like, can you just hold it in place? And so they were like, well, yeah, I guess. And so they put him on a stretcher and pulled him back up on stage. And this all happened within like 10 minutes. And they pulled him back on stage, set up a pelican case to elevate his leg. And that paramedic just held his foot in place. And so once that was kind of settled, like, okay, this is happening. Everything behind the scenes was just this insane. We were like getting ambulances lined up with a motorcade to go against traffic to get into the emergency room. And then we were just like, okay, this is happening. He's wanting to keep going with the show. And I remember some paramedics showed up with a roll of plaster casts and a bucket of water to the side of the stage. And so once they showed up with that, we had to get his attention to say like, hey, they're going to set your leg now. And they did all of this on stage. And so when they pulled him off to go and get the cast, Taylor just sang a song, and they did like a cover, and they pulled him off to the side of the stage, wrapped his leg, set it, waited for the cast to dry. And as soon as it dried, he was back up out on stage. And it was fucking wild, and then by like the end of it, he was on crutches, and there was an acoustic part of the set where he like went down into the middle of the crowd, and he was on crutches, still doing the show. And it's crazy because that was the longest show that we had ever done before and since. And it was like 3 hours. And then after that, straight to the ambulance to the hospital, and then flew back to London. And we ended up canceling the rest of the run, but we ended up stuck in London for a couple of weeks. And but I'll never forget that. Because,
I can understand how you could never forget that. I mean, I read his book about the whole story, and you just told it a little bit better than a great storyteller such as Dave.
Yeah, it was a wild day. I remember he forgot his wallet, and I had to like snag his wallet and bring it to him, all this stuff. But that was a really crazy time.
Wow.
But I'll never forget that. And as far as like music that I've done myself, and I mean, there's been a bunch, whenever I'll never forget the time that whenever Broken Gold got to tour with CJ Ramone, that was a really special time too, because he was the best, and he really took care of us on tour, and we still talk to this day, and he's just such a great dude. And like I said, I've been really lucky to kind of have all these different cool things happen, or at least to be around it. You know what I mean? Like to be a fly on the wall. And so those are some times. I mean, there's so many with Gamblers too that I'll never forget. Just what a crazy band to be in.
Well, let's save some of those for when I meet you in person. You can tell me the stories directly. But, we've been here for a while now. I've enjoyed, sitting here talking to you. Hours fly by really fast when you enjoy someone's company and hearing what they have to say. So before we move on to our final segment, I'd like to give you the opportunity right now to tell all the listeners here and everybody like how to find everything that Broken Gold does and how to keep up with what you're doing.
Yeah, we have all of the socials. We've got Instagram and TikTok and Twitter, all that stuff. Facebook, it's all at Broken Gold ATX. That is pretty much how everything is labeled. And we've got a Bandcamp with there's some cool stuff that's only on the Bandcamp. That's kind of where I have like demos. I have a bunch of demos from the first record that I threw up there that you get once you get Recovery Journal and all of our EPs. And it's been a long time coming for a second record. For a while there, I was kind of in that same thing that I think Danny had mentioned too, where it's like, we're only going to do EPs, people's attention spans are so short that we'll just release these little 3 songs at a time. But I really just wanted to have like a formal statement with this record. And so you can find all of that stuff on everything that you look it up. You just got to look up Broken Gold.
Yeah.
We got some videos coming out, which I'm really excited about. We, for the song Bad Days, we have Alejandro Escovedo. He came by the studio and he's a good buddy of the band. And he sang on 2 of the songs on the record. And Bad Days is the big rocker that we had him on. And then he also sings on a ballad called Looking Up that was a really cool experience getting him a part of that. But all of that stuff will be available by the time this comes out.
Nice. Awesome, man. Well, we're in our final segment of our show. It's our weekly threes. It's 3 things that you're listening to right now that you would like people to check out. You give your 3 and then I give my 3.
Okay. 3 things. I have been listening to that band. Their name is spelled Alvvays, Alvvas. But they just put out a record called Blue Rev that is so good. And I was aware of this band, and I think I've even played festivals with them with Band of Horses, but I'd never really listened to them. But this record in particular was one of the first records in years that I like. As soon as it was done, I started it again and listened to it on repeat. And then I went and bought the album. That is one of my favorite current things out right now. And other things that I've been listening to, there's this really cool band from England called Bad Nerves.
Yeah,
they are they're cool. It's one of, like I was saying earlier about the Marked Men. The Marked Men kind of have their own, like when you listen to them, you can hear like, okay, Ramones sort of thing, but there's something else going on there. And Jeff Burke and the Marked Men has kind of, I feel like, sort of made almost his own sort of style with that band. They sound very unique, even though they will remind you of some certain things. But it is really crazy to see the evolution of the Marked Men getting out there and hearing bands that remind you of the Marked Men now. And Bad Nerves is one of those bands that has that same sort of vibe. And so I was really surprised. I was like, oh my God, there's a band from England doing like a Marked Men thing now. But they're really good, and their songs are really good. That'd be one thing if they were just aping the recording style and everything, but they actually write really good songs. And then one other thing that I've been listening to a lot lately is I recently came into a lot of like old dub reggae vinyl. So I've been listening to a lot of that stuff, like Big Youth, Screaming Target. And, that's also something that I listen to quite a bit is old Trojan comps and reggae and stuff like that. But the new Gentleman Rogues record too, special plus one, the new Gentleman Rogues
honorable
record.
mention. Yeah,
it's really good.
Nice.
Danny actually has a cameo in our video for Spiraling.
Nice. Can't wait to see that then.
Yeah.
Yeah, his Kids in the Hall take on his solidarity is awesome. That video is great. He sent it to me before they released it. I was like, dude, that is so awesome. Fucking Kids in the Hall. I love it.
Yeah, that's rad, dude. I'll get your email before I don't think Henry gave it to me. I'll get your email. I'll send you some stuff.
Awesome. All right, so turn for my three. My three for this week. The first one is a band called Glom, Glom, indie rock from Brooklyn. The name of the album is Merit. Just really cool. It's kind of got like a 90s indie rock vibe to it, which I think is cool. Why I jumped on it.
Merit. I'm writing it down too.
Yeah. The next band is a band called Shell. Just how it's spelt, just the way I said it, Shell. The name of the album is The Need to Separate. It's like new, but it's like fuzzy grunge rock. They're from Wales. It's really got that like, it's got that 90s like sound to it. And this is what happens when I find something that I like I just try to find new bands that are doing the old thing where I call it nostalgic because it sounds new, but it's got the hint of the old stuff. So,
oh, that's cool. I like that nostalgic.
Yeah. And then the last band that I have is this band called The Petty Saints. They have an EP out called Who Started the War? And it's just straight rock and roll ripping in your face from the UK. Really fucking good. Those are the three I got for this week.
That's awesome. You should check out this band called Rambler, RMBLR. They're from Atlanta, and I play guitar with them sometimes, but that's the only thing that I'm connected to them with, but they write really, really awesome rock and roll 70s. Like like when I was saying, when I was a kid and I was looking for bands that were doing like 77 style punk rock.
Yeah.
This band is one of the bands kind of doing it right. And
nice. It just really wrote it down. I will definitely be hitting that up.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Awesome. Well, Ian, before we say our goodbyes here on the show, I want to get this on recording, but the first thing is thank you so much for your contributions to the Music Society, especially with teaching music as well. It's extremely important, and thank you so much for creating the music that brought you and I together, because without that, it's so amazing, and we wish you nothing but the best. You have the talent to drive you forward, and I'm happy to be a part of it and have you here and enjoy listening to your stories, because as I told you before we started, everyone's got a story and they all deserve to be heard. And I'm glad you were happy to share with us today and open up a little bit of Pandora's box for us. I really had a great time, and I appreciate everything you've done so far in your life and given back. And I can't wait for more.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for having me on here. It's nice to hear, that somebody's listened and cares.
It is important. It is important. Yeah. But I have, and I do, and I want to say thank you because it's like you wrote it for me. So I appreciate it.
Oh man, that's the best. That's the best.
But everybody, you know what time it is now. It's time to go out, listen to Broken Gold, and have a great fucking time.
Good plans
Thanks again for tuning into the Hidden Tracks podcast. We hope you enjoyed this week's show. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at HiddenTracks99. Also, send all your submissions myhiddentracks99@gmail.com. Tune in next week. You may find your new favorite band, and don't forget to go out and have a great fucking time.